Our talk today is about driving inclusive practice, navigating the potholes and driving inclusive practice. So what we're going to do is share a bit of a journey that we've been on together.
Yep.
My name's Atif Choudhury, and I'm from a social enterprise called DNA, Diversity and Ability.
And they won a prize today. Yay!
That's a picture of me, just in case you confuse me with Pam. And
because we both wear glasses, so we know. So I work at the Office for National Statistics, and my title is Head of Diversity. Don't know quite what that means, but a lot of things to a lot of people. So it's quite interesting work, depending on who I'm talking to.
Good. And everyone here has heard of ONS, right? You all know what ONS does? Good, right, that helps a lot. So we're going to touch on that a little bit later. Okay, so this is us. I won't spend ages talking about that because it's not so important for now, but the values are, so I'm just going to touch on it just for a few seconds. DNA is a social enterprise, as I said earlier. We're made up of a community of now nearly 92 people. Now, everybody in DNA has a story in context of marginalisation. A lot of it is around neurodiversity and neurodivergent learners, myself included, but a lot of it was physical differences. We're winning lots of awards, and we recently just won a big award for, today as well, that's great, but we just won an award for improving the disability employment gap, largely because of the size of the team and how many people are impacted by learning differences and physical differences. But it's an odd thing to win an award for, and I think the reason I want to say this is really to touch on the day, is we have a team that size because we need them. We need the team that size. It's right across the country, and we're working with a government as well. But I am not looking to recruit disabled learners because of it being the right thing to do. I'm recruiting disabled learners because I need the lived experience to show us what good looks like. And this is a really important value to understand. We are working across the country in people's homes. These are very sacred places where people go to not be judged, and we're working in that space. And when we have people who can emotionally connect to some of the disparities and the unfairness, it makes it stronger. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody with cerebral palsy is automatically better to deal with somebody else with cerebral palsy. That's not true. Their socioeconomic stories could be completely different. Their attitudes could be completely different. Their social connections of support could be completely different. So that's not how we do it. But what we are looking to do is to figure out how we move the issue away from disabilities into an issue of disablement. And what do we mean by that? We're really saying is, what are the points that are temporary? What are the points that are permanent? What are the things that we can fix right here and now that stops all the constant othering? Half of this room, if we were 100 years ago, half of this room would be disabled. The reason I know that is because half of this room is wearing glasses right now. Yeah? We've normalised it. We get to a point where we no longer talk about it. It's fantastic, right? And that's what we're going for. How do we normalise the differences that are every day around us? So we no longer talk about disabled people. We're just talking about people and whether they are really useful assets for us or not. Mostly everyone is. Okay, so far so good? Okay, so the question is, what does diversity look like? I mean, that's probably everyone there, I'm sure you've all heard of. Does anyone recognise anyone that they can't recognise? No? All right, good. That's a good thing, right? But really, what does diversity look like? Well, I'm standing in East London, I'm looking across, and it looks like you, right? All of you, right? That's wonderful. And I tell you, this year's JED seems different from last year's. I don't know if anyone was here last year, but just on cultural diversity, this year's a lot stronger, you know? But a question I've got, and it's really a bedrock, is for every Steve Jobs, for Thomas Edison, who invented your light bulb, for Hugh Logie Bard, who created your TV.
He was Scottish, by the way.
He was, yeah, he was. And very dyslexic. Well, and great with it, right? For all of these stories, we get excited, and so we should. But it's also part of the problem. We get excited when it's happened, when they've got a story to tell. For every one of these, we all get excited to say, you know, this is amazing. Without this alternative thinking, we wouldn't have had this. Without this engagement, we wouldn't have understood this. But then we've got to think, well, if we know that, then why aren't we talking about it in the workplace? There are people around us every day, and the theme of the morning conversation was about that. What are we missing when we're not talking about these issues? And what we're missing when people themselves are going through learning differences, but they're not able to access the kind of support around them, or because there's issues around socioeconomics, there's issues around attitude changes, there's issues around cultural differences, where that kind of shaming doesn't make it easy to come forward. And it also makes it very difficult for organisations with the best will in the world to know what they don't know. Right? It's really tough.
It's those known unknowns and unknown unknowns, whatever that phrase was. Can everybody remember what that sentence was?
So next time I do a slide saying what does diversity look like, I really want to put a big slide of people who just aren't famous. It'd be just as real, right? So just to think on that. So here's a question for you. How long do you think that, the room, how long do you think diversity is mattered for? Anyone?
Since eternity, basically.
Since eternity.
The most ancient books that we commonly refer to. Look at Adam and Eve, not Adam and Eve, but Cain and Abel,
Right.
where they were differentiated, and as a consequence of which we now still reap the rewards, whereby society aligns right with bad, right with good.
Right, and without biodiversity, there's not a single person in this room that would be here, right? Right? Just it wouldn't have happened. And you're right, ancient books are part of it. Truth is, diversity has always mattered, right? We're here today because it's mattered. That doesn't mean that we've always been excited by it. And you're quite right. In fact, we're not excited enough. In terms of ancient books, by the way, that's the Doomsday Book. Anyone come across that? Yeah? No? A very old book designed to make sure that you could really tax the crap out of the poor. But it's probably the first example of what would have become, what came on to become the census, which we're going to touch on.
Yeah, we are
But
a little bit.
it wasn't designed to measure diversity. It was designed to measure what people had what.
Yeah, who had what, and how much can I tax you for that? Yeah, see, taxes, they've been here forever.
And they probably continue as well. Right, so we are saying that, okay, the Doomsday Book was probably an example of how this country first said, we need to get together and say, what is the narrative of this country? Yeah, didn't necessarily come from a good place, but it led to a lot of people coming together and a lot of people resisting it as well. And that resistance partly gave us the democracy we've got today. So diversity can do some great things. So then the question that has come up really, and it's really a theme, it's what Jed's about, is what is the narrative of the UK? What is, and again, I'm in East London, you have to sort of see where I'm standing at the moment to look at you all, right? But it is a great example of what the UK is, the UK narrative. I know we are entering some fairly difficult periods, and I won't use that dreaded B word.
I've told him he's not to talk about it today. Any other day.
But in that,
The problem here is that once you say what is the UK narrative, that in itself is a broad question, because what the UK narrative for East London is not the UK narrative for Newcastle or for Glasgow
Yes.
or Belfast.
great, perfect, and you're dead right. And it isn't. In this room, actually, sometimes we can be in a really comfortable place where we discuss inclusion, disability, engagement, and yet we're a bubble. You're quite right. And when we talk about social disparity, how do we speak to that message to a group and a community that would not begin to be able to afford to be here, or even work for small, medium enterprises that couldn't afford to pay for the tickets to be here? You are quite right. But that choice isn't always there. When we look at a challenge, and I guess this is getting to how Pam and I met, was Pam is, as you said earlier, head of diversity and inclusion for ONS. And ONS does a lot of important things in terms of measuring statistics. It has a huge network of thousands of people measuring stats and data all day. It does it brilliantly. They're like accountants, but without the sense of humour. You know, I know, I'm kidding. Yeah. But
He's going to say lies, damn lies, and statistics next. So yeah.
But one of the issues that ONS has to face, and can you think what that might be? One of the biggest things, that's billions is spent on it. No, you're all affected by it. Everyone in this room has done it at some point. Yes. Good. You're great, by the way. It's great. He's not a plant, honestly.
We haven't primed. We promised we haven't primed him.
Okay, so the census, right. So that's one of the challenges. So when Pam and I first got talking about diversity and inclusion and to work with her team, I thought, wow, this is a great challenge for DNA. It's a brilliant organisation to work for. It's a massive organisation to work for. It has an employment rate of over 4,000 people.
Yeah, now about to leap to
7, no?
well, it'll be 60,000 by 2021 for the actual census data collection exercise. So it's a massive.
Take stock of that for a second. 60,000 people, just big, right?
Collecting data.
Is there any company that's been here today, with the exception of BP, that could say that, right? No, it's huge, right? It's big, right? But more importantly than BP. And it is much more important for this one reason. It is carrying a decision of what is the narrative of the UK. What does the UK look like? And it's big. We're entering a space that the last census wasn't in. This current census will have a different set of attitudes than the one 10 years before it, and a massive different one to the one in 2001. Of course it has. Britain's identity is changing, and that's a good thing. Perhaps it will change more and more in the next one. Will we be more polarised? I'm going to give you some things to think about. In this census coming up in 2020, there will be more polarised Muslims that are afraid of what this data means, that the previous one wouldn't have engaged them on. You will have more millenniums who will not trust data, especially after Cambridge Analytica, which will affect all of us, but it will have more millenniums who are used to the way data is abused, in the way the generation before it, and one of them, we didn't. I thought, oh, this is paper, I'll just fill this in. It won't go anywhere. That's a different set of thinking, right? We have more, this next census will engage on fluid sexual identity in a different way than the previous census would have done. Am I right? Right? Because these ideas are no longer binary. They perhaps never have been, but they were asked in binary ways. We will have, statistically speaking, more Jedis than we will have Jewish people in the next census. Think about it, it's the fourth largest religion in the UK.
Well, it had 300,000 last census for Jedi Knights, so we're hoping, see how many more we can get.
So we're looking for more as well, so if you want to sign up. You're welcome. So the question is getting it right. And this is a big question, right? Because if ONS has that challenge on its census, then it has to get it right inside. It has to get it right with its 4,000 people. It has to get it right with its 7,000 people.
60,000.
And 60,000.
Yeah.
So if ONS can't get that right, what will happen to the census? No?
Well, I can answer some of that. Of course, the UK government is looking to move away from a 10-year census, and this census on 2021 will be the first time that we'll be testing the electronic recording of census data, and it will be more of a continuous process rather than a 10-year gap between censuses because of the rapid change of society. You know, where we could kind of put up with 10-year gaps previously, we may not be able to do that in the future. Still a decision to be made, still got to go through Parliament, all those kind of things, but those are the proposals being made at the moment and being put through so that we can more accurately see the changes in our society as we go on.
Good. Yeah. So I'm going to hand over it to Pam for a bit, but it was just to say our relationship was to work together to get this question answered. What does getting it right look like? And it's not an easy thing, and it's certainly something that DNA just can't do just by sweeping in. We can't. It's a longitudinal approach, discussing values and sharing them, and looking at technology and how technology can play a role in hidden disabilities and how we have to get to this engagement where people don't have to be dissected or be challenged by their own cultural differences, but they're actually saying, here's a library of attitudes that feel accessible. Here's a safe space. Here's a bunch of technologies that I can just use without having to go through occupational health and be dissected and working in a reactive learning environment. Here's what anticipation can look like. Potholes.
That was not just excitement, anticipation, because I got the button. Yeah. Okay, a bit like lots of organisations, we benchmark ourselves against all sorts of things. The Office for National Statistics strategy is better statistics, better decisions, because all the data that we produce for the nation is used by decision makers in business and in government, local authorities. Everything is kind of based on those national statistics that we produce for the nation. So, lots of stuff, the benchmarking. Everybody today has been talking a bit about a journey, somewhere that we're going. I'm a bit fed up with this journey because I've been at it for quite a number of years now, and I'd like to really get somewhere. And actually, hopefully, some of these statistics are showing us that we are getting somewhere. It's just a bit slow for me because I'm going to be retired soon, and it's going to be, you know, I'm going to hit retirement, and I wanted the journey to be further along than it is now. However, the organisation itself will continue and has got lots of work to do in this area still. But we have made a lot of progress inside the business as well.
Listen, I mean, I said it earlier, and I'm joking. I'm saying I'm not. Kill compliance, right? What we mean is, of course, we need to safeguard. Of course, we need a benchmark. But we can become so fixated by compliance and institutional caution that nothing radical happens, right?
Because the National Statistics Office, you know, talk about caution. You know, we've got to publish those statistics, and we've got to be sure what we're saying, because you can bet your bottom dollar the newspapers or anybody, the media will pick up on it, tell us it's fake, fake news, tell us the UK Statistics Authority, you know, when data is misused by MPs even, or anybody who uses our data, we have to then challenge that. Okay, so 3 potholes we've come across in the organisation with the people we're working with in terms of ensuring that disability is what's the word? Supported in the organisation. So people managers are one of them. I'm sure you've got the same things in your own organisations. People don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. You've heard a lot about that earlier on today as well. And we'll talk a minute about what we're doing about those. Another one is about sharing the message. So it's about raising awareness, getting people talking about it, getting people comfortable to say and talk to each other. And the last one is technology, particularly the kind of things that people need as adjustments and to support them in the workplace. I'm going to go on. I'll come back in a minute. So in terms of our people manager, as Atif was saying, we're trying to move to get them to anticipate people's needs, but also to say, actually, you know, what we've done is put in place lots of things so that barriers that people might come across don't exist. And that benefits everybody in the organisation, not just those with a disability. To be upstanders for people. You know, I don't know if you've heard it, but, you know, in the past in our organisation, we've had people say, why has that person got a special chair or a double screen, and I don't have that? Why are you treating somebody supposedly better than them? So it's actually about getting people to stand up and say, well, actually, I'm not bothered. I'm glad I don't have to have 2 screens or a special chair or anything. So, you know, just make the adjustment and be assured that that person needs that to do the best of their work in the organisation. Be allies to colleagues as well. Getting people, managers, to take ownership in terms of, it's your job to manage this. It's your job to remove barriers for the people that work for you. It's not some person in HR. You know, it's actually your job to do that. So think about it, work on it, do it. Empathy, peer support. There's lots of things there. Sharing the message. We have a lot of, particularly in the civil service, we do a lot of sending out information to people, don't we? Probably not so much listening to people. So actually what we need to do in terms of sharing message is flip that around and say, what is it that you need to know? What do you want to ask? What are the questions you need answered? You know, I'm telling you, we put out all sorts of things on the intranet about International Day of Disabled People's coming up on the 3rd of December. There'll be lots of information out there. But what our network group has done is flip that around, and instead they're going out saying, what do you want to ask us? Tell me. I can tell you about my disability and why I need this and why I need that and how you can support me and how you can be my ally. So it's a completely way of communicating with people. In terms of communicating, you need to do multiple methods. I mentioned earlier in terms of increasing our declaration rates. That was a long time ago, way before the census questions. That was saying, actually, we need to talk to people face to face. You need to do the one-to-one talking to people. Just putting out notices, just putting out articles or blogs or anything isn't going to do it. You need to go and talk to people. Using data to inform, because we are a statistics society, yes, we will use that data. And you're seeing lots of people talking today about data and how they've used it to transform their businesses. And we do the same in ours. We use our data to inform the decisions that we're making, however imperfect or whatever boxes we're using. At least we're heading somewhere and not just leaving things alone. Ensuring that there's a safe space for people to talk. And Atif's bit was about helping us embrace technology, finding solutions, making sure it's available to all of us to use. So we had a program where people who required different software, they had to apply for it individually as part of their occupational health assessment or something else like that. So what we've done, and we had multiple licenses across the organisation. Instead, we've made the organisation have a single license, and that software is available to all sorts of people, whether they have a disability or not, in the organisation. Centralising our budget for adjustments for people has been a very good step, because having each business area having to fund changes quite often brought people into conflict. Oh, you're spending my budget on that. Oh, I don't like that. And I've mentioned a couple of times in there is it's always new to someone. You know, people have been talking about this journey thing, and I said earlier on I was a bit fed up with it. But it is always a work in progress. It is always somewhere where we're trying to head. And that's okay, we've just got to keep going. And it is always new to somebody. So make sure you keep giving the message.
I mean, the theme is, just to reply, it is about avoiding those potholes. They are workable, especially when a workforce is that large and you're recruiting that big. As Pam's saying, it is always new to somebody. We're taking, in our case, the head of IT, right? The teams, the IT teams, that with the exception of maybe GCHQ, have got the most sacred data in the country, sensitive stuff. And we're going to say to them, we want you to anticipate. We want you to put special software on there. Some of it might even be open source. We want to make, not deliberately trying to make those networks vulnerable. That's not what we're saying. What we are going to say is, how can those support mechanisms be accessible? And how can they be made a lot more fluid and a lot more agile? And if we can do that right in an organization responsible for collecting such important data, then we have a better chance of getting that data right. You know? And that's been a chief part of it. So the theme really today is to discuss the potholes, the transitional changes, not so much the rights or wrongs of the census, but what ONS measures and what it does is data that is fundamentally important for us to learn from and to exchange and share upon and critique it if necessary. But we've got to know what that data is in order to, rather than we're going to have a big conversation about whether data is good or not, which is kind of not what today's about.
Have you thought about going to partnership with Facebook?
No. Okay, so that's it. And we might have run out of time, but I really wanted to do a quick quiz with your phones, but I don't know if we've got time for it. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
Okay, we're going to ask you now a set of 4 questions. Right? There's no real right or wrong, it's just a conversation. It would work with there's more people in the room, but it's okay. Right, what is the percentage of disabled people in employment in the UK that were registered as disabled? Right, you've got 30 seconds to answer that. Right.
That's people who are available for employment as well.
Yeah, they're available for employment. What would you... Okay.
50%.
So the answer is 50%, right. Right, so in comparison, the national is 80%, right? So what does it tell us the size of the gap? 30%, right? It's probably not going to be measured in this met in this lifetime. Just to think on that. Or it can be. It's a bigger conversation, but it can be met in this lifetime. But it needs a lot of people disclosing more, a lot of people accessing more, a lot of people anticipating more. But it may well be met in this lifetime. It depends on what we talk about disability and engagement. Next one. of access to work applications approved, how many people were awarded special aids and equipment? Was it 17,000, 13,000, 6,000, sorry, 9,000, or 15? Right, the answer is 13. So that's very few, right? If we talk about the number of people that were awarded access to work applications.
That's your
the actual people
50% again. Look.
yeah, it's very few. But the fact that it's so hard for that many people to go through, because 26,000 people awarded access to work applications is not representative of the UK task force or the UK workforce of disabled people. It's not. What does that tell us?
Those are just the people that bothered to try.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had perhaps the staying power or the socio-economic successes to be able to be familiar with it, or the management to help them apply. That does not tell us what's going on out
And
there
that may
at all.
also be a lot of people who are already in work. Okay, so a lot of people don't know about access to work till they're in work. So.
Okay, next one. We're going to whiz through this. This is really, it's a shame we didn't get to this with everybody in the room, but let's do the next question. Okay. What proportion of people with mental health difficulties believe workplace stress was the largest contributor? We had to really get the words down, but it's the largest contributor to their. What percentage would it be?
Oh,
right,
67,
yeah.
yeah. Good,
That's-
went for the high number. Well
that's
done.
huge.
Yeah.
Right, that's a huge fact, and it's growing more and more. Right,
Yeah, that definitely in Canada has gone up.
right.
hugely
We are
since 1970.
We are in an age now we're expected to respond to things much faster. We're given technology that allows us to have better workplace balance, but it doesn't, right? People want their answers quickly. They not necessarily want them in 9 to 5. Okay, last question, and we'll just finish on this one, which is, what percentage of the population rated their happiness as very high? As this was recently of March 2018, what percentage of the population rated their happiness as very high? Good.
Hey,
Right.
60%. Well
Five,
done.
so 5 of you got that right. It was 16%. That's surprisingly high, right? Maybe they were very high when they decided to do that form. But I'm surprised that it was that high, right? And it opens up a big conversation which we can't have about what is happiness. But what we really want to say is it's not all bleak, right? There's some difficult challenges ahead for everybody. But the workplace has the space to get better if we decide it matters to us. Right, that's it really. Thank you everybody, and thank you for listening and helping.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.